This lesson is about how you go from your results of your survey, even your preliminary results, to an initial sense of where people are in terms of high, medium, and low priority. Your goal overall is to figure out who you really want to spend your time focusing on. Who are the high priority targets? So here's one way to think about it. You don't want to focus on people who you have to persuade them in two different ways. So what you're trying to do is to determine who are left-leaning people who might not vote, but if they did vote, they probably vote the way you want them to. And who are people who are committed to voting who are not super Trumpy, but who are Trump curious or undecided. So again, your focus with those people is going to be getting them to vote for your candidate. And the focus of the first group is getting them to vote at all. So that is why you went through all of that surveying to figure out where people stand on those two dimensions. So to further explain this, I'm going to play a clip of a course that myself and Dr. Karen Tamarius from Smart Politics did in 2020 that will help you sort out the results of your survey.
So the question becomes, since obviously friends and family canvassing is a superior methodology, is how can people, ordinary folks, get started doing this kind of work? And often what I find is there's a certain fear about doing it because not all people are accustomed to talking politics in their families and in their relationships. And so that's what David and I focus on, is like, how can you have these conversations in a way that you prioritize the relationship above all else, and yet still are able to have an influence on others. So the first thing that you do is list the people in your personal network. And this is like you just cast a very wide net here. Who are all of the people, friends, family, colleagues, who you could possibly contact? In step 2, the goal is to reach out and ask people 2 questions. And these questions can be done by phone, email, text, whatever form of communication you feel most comfortable with. Now, these 2 questions are pretty simple. The first question is, how likely is it that you will vote? And you try to get them to answer that question on a scale. So you don't want them to just say, oh, it's really likely or not very likely. Pin them down a little bit with a number. And I like to use a scale from 0 to 100%, with 0 being absolutely not, you're not gonna, nothing could get you to vote, and 100% being absolutely going to vote. The only thing that could stop me is if I dropped out between now and the election. The second question is, how likely is it that if you vote, you would vote for my candidate, whoever that candidate may be? And again, you want to put that on a scale from 0 to 100%. So if I am supporting Biden, for example, the question becomes, how likely is it that you will vote for Biden? If you vote, that you would vote for Biden for president? Is it absolutely not, you would never even consider it, or absolutely he is the only choice right now, 100%? And then we move to step 3, which is where we really get strategic. Now that we have gathered this information, we have our list of friends and family, we chart people's answers on a grid so we can figure out exactly what our goals are and how we can prioritize our efforts. So I create a chart using the answers to the 2 questions. So on the vertical, the horizontal, no, vertical axis is the person's chance, likelihood of voting. So if somebody has a nearly 100% likelihood of voting and high support for my candidate, in this case we'll say Biden, then I would put a point up in the very right-hand corner to represent them. Now, if I encounter someone who likes Biden, supports him, but really isn't planning to vote, and in fact is not even registered, then I would put them down in this lower right-hand quadrant. So you fill it in with these points so you can prioritize your efforts. Once you've plotted your graph, the next step is to compare it using this legend. And what the different colors on this graph represent are the different goals you are going to pursue with voters in different areas. So if a person is in the blue area, that means they generally support your candidate, quite strongly support your candidate, but they have varying degrees of commitment to actually voting. And depending on where they fall, your efforts are largely going to be about making sure they vote. If they fall in the yellow area, they don't really have a preference. And so with those voters, what you're going to be focusing on is largely persuasion.
So the grid system that Karen talked about should help you refine your list of all possible people into a shorter list of high priority people. The high priority because they know they're going to vote, but they're not sure of who, or they're just only Trump curious but not super Trump supporting, or if they did vote, they'd vote how you want them to, but they're not sure they're going to vote. So after you've culled that to a smaller number, there's still more refining, which we'll talk about in the next lesson. If you like the content of this video, please press like or subscribe, because that helps the algorithm push it out to more people who might want to see it. Anything you do in support, whether it's a like or a subscribe or a share or even a small financial contribution to this self-funded project, is helpful in making sure we can continue this important work of spreading compassion for the sake of democracy.